Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Mr. Jake Larson.
So we were put in what they called a baloney. I don't know if you ever heard that name.
No.
It's like a ring of baloney, but it's all corn sits around there. And you could go in on one side, you come out the other all the way through. If anybody in that baloney was classified top secret bigot, B-I-G-O-T. That's the highest classification you could get. And we were working on the invasion. Now, after the war was over, I received the Bronze Star for what I did working on the invasion. Anybody that was top secret bigot in those balonies, you didn't walk around like anybody else. You were always kept under guard. Bigot was so top secret that you weren't able to be out, walk around with what you knew.
And so you didn't have the luxuries of freedoms that the other soldiers had by...
Oh, you were kept right in there, and when you were there, you worked on the invasion. That's what you did. The day was June 5th.
Yes, correct. June 5th was the original day, and because of bad weather and because the invasion was going to rely heavily on the Pathfinders and the airborne going in first, you guys had, and plus, obviously, with ocean tides and the sea levels, the whole thing had to be scrapped and pushed out a day.
That's exactly what happened. Over a month before D-Day, we went back to our units and to get them all ready to move at the invasion. And the British at that time were having an operation, they call it an operation, at Slapton Sands. It was for the benefit of the Americans. They were invited to participate, and Slapton Sands on the southeast coast of England, between Plymouth and Portsmouth, the landings there were like landing on Omaha Beach. And these special landings, we were supposed to come in there on LSTs, that's landing ship tanks. These landing ship tanks, instead of holding tanks, they held 400 soldiers. The British were going to greet them at Slapton Sands with live fire.
Now, for those listening at home, correct me if I'm wrong, but this Slapton Sands operation was essentially a dress rehearsal to prepare you guys for the D-Day invasion, correct?
Absolutely, yes. So we were going to get a little indoctrination from the British. And there were 3 of those LSTs, and I happened to be in the left one with 400 of us there. They had armed soldiers and machine guns and everything, so that we couldn't be intercepted. There was another one of these landing ship tanks to the right of us. I was very poor at judging distance in the water. I would say half a mile away. And then there was a third one, another half mile farther on. And behind us, there were groups of landing ship tanks, and I think there was 11 in all. But they were in threes coming up there to Slapton Sands. When we got close to Slapton Sands, 2 German E-boats intercepted us, and they torpedoed the 2 landing ship tanks on my right, and they shot the heck out of the components that were taking care of the one I was in. In fact, they shot so much of the stuff that they cut off our air, and we were diesel gassed. 400 of us laying there on the floor vomiting and trying to breathe through wet handkerchiefs. I don't know how we made it back to Plymouth, England. We got down there, and we stumbled out of there, and there was a full-bird colonel got us to attention, and he said, under penalty of court-martial, you cannot talk about this even to your commanding officers.
Well, of course, because when the news, if the news would have gotten out that this happened during, as we said, a dress rehearsal, not only would it have been horrible for the Allies and the morale, but it would have been a huge morale boost for the Germans to know the amount of damage they caused. You guys were basically sitting ducks. You really couldn't defend yourselves from the Germans, could you?
We couldn't. We had no way to defend ourselves. We carried the M1 Grand.
Yeah.
Well, it was like a pea shooter.
Well, I often tell people who don't realize that when you guys landed and when you're doing these operations, you were essentially wearing your Sunday best. You had on wool trousers, a button-up shirt, boots, and then you just put on some leggings, a helmet, and a haversack and called it a day.
Our main piece of defense was our helmet.
And that pretty much provided you protection from ricocheting flying rocks.
From shrapnel.
Exactly. Do you recall how many lives were lost during the incident at Slapton Sands?
795 people died there. And our Army did not tell anyone, the surviving families, that their sons were killed at Slapton Sands. They told them they were killed in the invasion of Europe. I've got also an exciting thing about D-Day, if you want to hear a little bit about that.
I got all the time in the world. I'll sit here for the next 3 hours. You just keep talking, sir.
All right. I was on the command ship, but I landed with the 1st Division.
Big Red One.
The Big Red One. We had the 1st and 29th Divisions under us. We were in charge of Omaha Beach. That's 5th Corps was in charge of Omaha Beach under 1st Army. And 1st Army also had Utah Beach. That was under 7th Corps. And the 4th Division was supposed to come in on Utah Beach. Now, I didn't know this particular until years after that Slapton Sands incident was brought up. But 400 of the ones that were sunk were from postal land on Utah Beach. So they had to get another division in there. I don't know today what that division was. And those were guys that landed on Omaha Beach without any warning. That fast.
Wow. What wave did you go in on?
The waves were all screwed up because Omaha Beach, they could not take any more onto the beach because the Germans were defending it so much. We just went around in circles out there. It seemed like forever.
Now, that's a very good point. I want to pause right there real quick. 2 things for the listeners at home who aren't up to speed on D-Day. One, part of the battle planning was that the Air Force was going to go in and bomb the beaches, thus making deep craters to provide giant foxholes for you guys to hide from the machine guns. That didn't happen. Most of the pilots were new and they missed the beach, and so you guys didn't have the craters to rely on. But more importantly, you just said you were out there circling for hours and hours. Could you, for those listening at home, imagine, you got your helmet on, you got your 8-pound M1 Garand, you got ammo, you got your belongings in your musette bag or your haversack on your back.
Oh, wait, it was our backpack. 75 pounds we carried. 30 of us in those LSTs.
And so 30 of you are riding around for hours, cramped, can't move, got all this weight on you, and then finally the time comes and they expect you to be able to get up and run through deep water.
It was a flat-bottom boat. It was rough seas. Some of the guys were vomiting, seasick, and there's another blessing I've got. I don't get seasick. And but I got pretty upset.
Sure.
When you see others vomiting.
Those ramps, when they get wet, were super slick. And so not only have you been sitting there, now you're getting fired upon. You're supposed to get down this ramp in an orderly fashion, carrying all this heavy weight and not slip, fall into the water.
We didn't have any problem there. When we got off, the ramp was so down, we landed in water that came up to our chins. The guy didn't put us in close enough. But
did you have to inflate your invasion belt?
We had no invasion belt. Wow. I had no invasion belt. None of us had invasion belts. Our helmet was upside down, and air in the top of that helmet held us up, I think. Now, when we got on the landing ship, I was the first one in there. Came down that rope ladder, and the water was coming up 3-4 feet. And then down, and then up and down, and that landing craft was coming like that. So getting on it was just about a impossible thing, but we did. I was at the last end there, right by the Navy pilot. So when they came off, I was the last guy out. And when we started in line, walking toward the beach, one thing came to our minds, that Germans had over 1 million landmines set in that beach. And there were other lines coming from other ships coming in. And every once in a while you'd see a spurt of water shoot up from some guy stepping on a landmine. I made sure that I was walking in the steps of the people in front of me. And when we got to where the water was hardly any there, and I could step out, I found a little burl, 6-8 inches, like sandstone, but it didn't shoot up against the German machine gun fire that was shooting at me from two sides. They were shooting from the left and from the right. These German machine guns, these were shooting 12,000 rounds a minute, like a buzzsaw.
Sure.
They were shooting in front of me, and man, I was kind of nervous then. I was smoking cigarettes then,
yeah.
And I had a waterproof cigarette holder, and I reached in and got out a cigarette. Dang, I reached in again, my matches were wet.
Oh, man.
Not 3 feet behind me, there was another soldier. So I turned around and says, "Hey, buddy, have you got a match?" I got no answer. I turned around and looked again. There was no head under the helmet. And to this day, I thank the spirit of that boy for me getting up and running. I came in must have came in at the time where they were reloading their machine guns, and I ran, and then they started to shooting at me. And part of the way there, I looked up and I said, "God, what the hell am I doing here? I can't see anybody to shoot at, and they can shoot at me." But I made it to the cliff. I made it, and I thank God to this day for guidance from the soul of that soldier. Lost his head down there, back there.
How old were you?
I was a 21-year-old buck sergeant. We finally made it up that place where we were going to go up was filled with barbed wire and stuff, and we couldn't get in there and crawl up that damn cliff. And so they got some Bangalore torpedoes, and they started putting those together, and the Germans killed at least two of the guys that were pushing them together. They finally got a charge up through that debris there and landed up, and that cleared the spot so we could make it up there. And as quick as we made it up there, the Germans cleared out. They cleared out. If you get behind those fortifications, they have no protection. Their whole thing is the protection from the front. So they just cleared out.
They didn't have any reinforcements because of the operation we did with Patton and the Ghost Army.
Had nobody gardening back there.
Because Hitler sent all their tanks and most of their equipment up north because of what the French resistance did and the false information that was given out. The Germans thought the landing was going to be farther up north.
So we got the command post set up, the G3 command post, and it was about 7 o'clock at that time, 7 o'clock in the evening. And Madison Rich, Corporal Madison Rich, and I were digging our foxholes in the sand, and I found a new litter that hadn't been used, just laying there. So I dug my foxhole a little bit larger so I could set that down in there. I planned to have my sleeping bag on top of that so I wouldn't be in the damp sand.
Sure.
And it got to be about 7:15, and I just put that litter down in there, and someone said, called from the command post, Sergeant Larson, Colonel Hill wants to see you immediately. So I went in, see Colonel Hill. He was G3, a full bird colonel, and we only had 2 officers in G3, a full bird colonel and a lieutenant colonel, his assistant. So Colonel Hill says, Sergeant, he says, I just got word from First Army. He says, they want me to keep G3 open 24 hours a day. He says, you are going to run the night shift from now on. I haven't slept since the 4th. I was running on guts, I don't know how else to say it, or adrenaline. And I said, what time is that going on? He says, from 7:30 to 7:30. Wow.
It's a long shift.
So I went back to where I had the foxhole, and Corporal Rich was just climbing into his sleeping bag. And I said, Matty, you could sleep in my foxhole tonight. I got that litter in there. He reached over and laid his M1 Garand rifle on my litter. I went in to work. He went to sleep. At midnight, German reconnaissance planes came over. And they lit up the sky with these little handkerchief parachute magnesium flares. And our anti-aircraft started shooting up at reconnaissance planes. After an hour, that all quieted down, and I don't know how I spent that night. I was in another land, another world, but it came time to be relieved, and I went back to where Madison Rich was, and he reached over and picked up his M1 Garand off of my litter, and it fell in two. A piece of shrapnel from our anti-aircraft had come down and hit that gun and broke it right in two.
Wow, and that's a heavy, thick stock on that thing, too.
It's unbelievable. This story, people say, did you just make that up? For confirmation, on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I was over in France. I was on Omaha Beach. I had 5 reporters following me, and a German photographer trailing behind. After the 5 reporters got through with me, a reporter from Moscow came in, and this was broadcast all over the United States, and I got cards from Sweden. And there was a young guy in New York that saw that broadcast. And he called his brother in New Jersey. He said, you know, Frank, he says, I wonder if that Jake Larson they're talking about is the one our dad always talked about. And finally, they got a hold of the bagel shop, because I mentioned that, and they got a hold of my son, Carlin, and this guy said, you know, my dad talked about Jake Larson when he was over there, and about that, his gun being broke right in two at the landing on D-Day. And Carlin says, well, what was your dad's first and last name? My dad's name, I can't believe that getting into this way. My dad's name was Madison Rich. And my son said, yeah, that's my dad. Yeah, this Madison Rich's son came to California and saw me because of that broadcast. So I'm reassured this isn't a made-up story. It's confirmed now. I am so blessed, Don. I'm so blessed in life, and I was blessed over there, and I want to here state that my reason for going over to the 75th anniversary of D-Day was not for my benefit. I wanted my children to go over there and see some of the stuff that I had gone through, and I wanted to pay my respects to over the 9,000 that gave their life that I could be here. I'm the only one alive. I'm the only one alive in the 3 different units that I was in.
Mr. Keith Anderson. So basically at this point they're going to streamline your training, and you're basically going to get the fast track and not get the in-depth, consistent training.
Fast track. It was fast as a fast track. Because we found out that the 398th Bomb Group had just gotten its orders to join the 8th Air Force from England. They had been serving as a year as a training group, which was training other groups that were heading over. None of them had been overseas themselves. All of a sudden, from replacement depot and any training in a tactical airplane, I was being sent right to a bomb group as on its way overseas, and quite an acceleration. We were the very last B-17 group assigned at the 8th Air Force. Now, at that time, the last year of the war, there were 30 bomb groups in the 8th Air Force. I think there were 32, divided into 3 divisions, the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd division. The 1st division was B-17 groups only. The 2nd division was B-24 groups, and the 3rd division was a mixture of both of them. At any rate, here I graduated on January 7th, and in February I was already assigned to a bomb group as on its way overseas. And I was very lucky once I got there. When I was there, I was assigned immediately to a crew, an existing crew. And it turned out to be the leading pilot and the lead crew of the whole group. So from the beginning of when I joined that group, I was in very select company. My pilot at that time was only a second lieutenant still, but he had over 1,000 hours of B-17 time and a lot of hours prior to that as a civilian. He was also 25 years old, which is as old as you could be to start out flight training. Each crew was assigned an airplane of its own, and immediately we went and painted ours up and named it and so forth.
Do you remember what you guys named it?
Yeah, they named it Anytime Annie, after the girlfriend of some guy, one of the gunners on the crew. And the interesting thing is that we flew those airplanes over to England, and 2 days later, they were all gone, and we had brand new airplanes. Just used this to fly them overseas, because they still had to go through a modification center in England to get it up to snuff for combat. I understand at that time, the manufacturers would every now and again completely revamp their airplane, and with what they call a new model. And we had the brand new Model G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G model of the B-17. But even then, in combat, things progress so rapidly, they have to make changes. They decided they were going to make a modification to the airplane right away. They had modification centers right in England where they would send the airplane and get it prepared for combat. So they took our brand new Anytime Annie away from us, and it went to modification center, and eventually was assigned a group. And I read later that it was shot down on about its fourth or fifth mission before the North Sea. So Anytime Annie didn't last too long. From then on, we didn't bother naming our airplanes. We also found out that as a lead crew, you flew special airplanes. For one thing, they were equipped with radar. All the airplanes weren't equipped with radar at that time. And they had special bomb sights and special this and that. So each group had 6 or 7 lead airplanes, and then the lead crews would fluctuate flying those lead airplanes.
Now, I understand you quickly learned there was a disadvantage almost to being a co-pilot in a lead airplane, and when that happened, an NCO or a member higher up would oftentimes take your seat, and you were relegated to being a observer to the tail gunner. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I soon found out, and I wasn't very happy about it, that the co-pilot on the lead crew was replaced by generally a senior officer. Our group commander was a full colonel, and he flew several missions with us, with him sitting in the co-pilot seat, me flying as a tail gunner. And I wasn't very happy about being killed as a tail gunner after I'd spent all that time learning how to fly.
You just went from seeing what's going on to watching what just happened out the back and staring at the faces of the gentlemen flying behind you. Now,
yeah, it was a good place to be, because later on I saw a lot of airplanes blow up. The tail used to come off intact and flutter down on its own, and often you see one figure jump out of there and open a chute, and no chutes coming out of the main section of the airplane. So from that aspect, being a tail gunner was favorable.
From a logistical standpoint, was the escape hatch closer to the tail or to the cockpit of the plane? you could get to it
the
quicker.
The escape hatch for the tail gunner was its own escape hatch right next to the tail gunner. So he could get out of there in a hurry. It was just very easy, just kick the hatch open and jump.
Were there any times during the war that you had to evacuate your plane, or your plane didn't make it home from a mission?
We had an engine catch fire as we were climbing to altitude, and the engines had a built-in fire extinguisher system, but we actuated that and it didn't work, and it kept burning, and we decided the plane was going to blow up any minute. We better get the hell out of there. So we all jumped, and I remember I was I was a tail gunner on that mission, so I went out the tail with the 3 other gunners. We all jumped together, and we could talk to each other all the way down, and we did. And all of a sudden, we hit the ground, and I remember that landed a lot harder than I thought it would be. I was trying to judge when I was going to hit the ground.
Now, when you're in a situation like that, is jumping's probably not even a concern at that point. I guess you in the forefront of your mind, you're thinking, okay, this plane's going down. Either I stay here and probably die, or I jump out of the plane and most likely survive. But I guess it happens so quickly, you probably don't really get a chance to register the idea before you even jump out that plane. It's just probably instinct at that point, fight or flight.
Well, I was never afraid of having to bail out. I always figured the chute would open, and from then on it'd be unknown, but so by then you're so used to getting shot at or getting killed in multiple ways that you're not too selective. So I didn't have any hesitancy about getting out of that airplane.
Now, when you landed, did you have the luxury of landing over friendly territory, or did you go down over enemy territory, or was it neutral?
No, we knew we were over friendly territory. We knew we were still over England, and so that was not a concern.
So once you and your 2 gunners landed, and you basically, I guess the first thing you have to figure out where you're at. Obviously, you knew you're in England, but not sure where at. How do you go about getting back home? You just find the nearest village and send out communication, or what's the process of the recovery for that?
Well, we all saw each other land, or we were close enough so we got together right away. And we were in ended up in somebody's yard, so I knocked on their door, told them who we were, what we were doing. They said, well, there's an RAF pilot lives down the street. Why don't you go see him? So I did that. I went down there, and he was having breakfast. So he says, you should wait for me to finish breakfast. I'll drive to my field. Well, he said, okay. Turns out he was a test pilot at, I forget the name of the field now, but it was their equivalent of Wright Field in this country. He took us to this field, and I phoned our base to tell them where we were. And they said they'd send an airplane down to pick us up, which they ultimately did. And
now, how many times?
While I'm there, I see these airplanes taxiing by with no propeller, and a lot of heat waves coming out the rear. Well, I'd never even heard of a jet airplane by then. Never even heard of it that I remember. So they were the first English jet And I forget the sequence of events by then. But by then we knew that the Germans had a jet airplane, whatever that was. And we should see them occasionally. And there was the British answer to the German jet, but they were way far behind.
It was the Gloucester Meteor, I believe, was the first British.
Yeah, it was the Gloucester Meteor. It was the English airplane.
What was your impression when you heard that thing take off? Because clearly the audible output of a jet engine is far, far superior than that of a prop plane. I mean, just the noise those things put off. What was your first impression when you saw that thing taxiing out on the runway?
Well, they did make a lot of noise taxiing, and they took so long to take off that they were practically out of sight down the end of the runway. By the time they got off the ground, you couldn't hear them anymore. So I didn't have any impression at all.
Oh, I got you. Now, I understand you flew about 7 missions or so as a tail gunner. In that time, did you ever have to engage the enemy with your machine gun?
No, I never had to actually fire that machine gun. I did fire it with airplanes so far away that I could barely see them, just so I could say I'd shot at a German airplane. But
sure. No.
Now, another thing I should explain. When we first got over there, then the 8th Air Force had developed its tactics pretty well. And they'd finally settled on 36 airplane group as an ideal bomb group. 36 airplanes in a formation.
Yeah, I believe in a past interview you said you guys had 12 ships to a squadron and 3 squads to a group.
We flew with 4 squadrons. You had an echelon of 3 airplanes and 1 tail. You had a lead plane, right wing, left wing, and tail. That would be a 4-plane unit. And with the 12 group formations, we would fly 4 of those. Pretty much after D-Day.
Now, speaking of D-Day, I understand that right around Operation Overlord, that the 600th Bomb Group participated in bombing and attacking coastal defenses of the enemies on the Cherbourg Peninsula. Did you participate in that during D-Day?
We were bombing the beach. We carried 100-pound bombs that day, and they were designed not to blow up things as much as to create foxholes for the infantry to have something to jump into.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't realize. Part of the strategic planning for the D-Day invasion was to have you guys lay bombs onto the beach to create craters, as you just said, to allow the gentlemen to get below the surface line to take cover from the enemy machine gun fire.
That was our function of our group. Now, different groups had different functions.
Sure.
Now, D-Day, we flew just 6-ship formations. That was the only time I ever flew in a 6-ship bombing mission.
Was the flak fire real bad on that day, or were they pretty much caught off guard?
I did see a burst of flak in the sky that day. They were concentrating on any heavy enough artillery they had available was concentrated on the shooting at our fleet, our invasion fleet. We were just a nuisance as far as they were concerned.
Now,
D-Day.
Now, speaking of flak, the first time you experienced flak, what can you compare it to? I mean, probably very little. I mean, is it like, obviously you have shrapnel penetrating your plane, but when those bursts go off, do they create blast waves that create turbulence, or is it just simply the shrapnel penetrating your plane?
An 88 shell would blow a plane apart. They had 88, 90, and 155, I think. So even an 88 shell could do more than just create the fragments, the shell fragments. It would just blow a whole airplane apart, or blow the nose off, blow the whole airplane up. Flak did a lot of different things.
But luckily, for the grace of God, during D-Day and during your mission to provide foxholes for the upcoming landing invasion, luckily you guys didn't have to deal with flak. For you on that day, was it pretty much a straightforward mission, or did you guys have any issues that you had to overcome?
No, it was pretty much of a straightforward mission. We didn't even get shot at. I don't think we saw a burst of flak in the air even.
And those are the missions that you mark down as the best ones to go on, obviously, because you get out there, you do what you're told to do, and everybody gets home safe, and you get to fly another day.
Yeah. In fact, originally we were going to fly 2 missions on D-Day. For some reason, they called off the second one. So we just came home and turned on the radios and listened to how the invasion was going.
This has been a Digital 410 production.